Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to the Netflix series. In this series this week, we are examining, recapping, summarizing, and analyzing Harry and Meghan's Netflix show that they did together a while back. As I've already mentioned, my biggest beef with it is that they packaged this and sell it and still have it listed to this day as more of a docuseries, nonfiction sort of a TV show, but it's very, very much fiction. There are so many lies and mistruths and exaggerations throughout, similar to the Oprah series. I will link these playlists for you here if you want to catch up on them or binge them, but here we're going to get into episode 4, pick up where we left off here. This episode opens with this clip.
And what she said to me was, it's like this fish that's like swimming perfectly powerful, it's on the right current, and then one day this little organism comes in.
She's independent, she's quite feisty. She's a controlling woman. Oh!
This foreign organism, and the entire thing goes, what is that? What is it doing here? It doesn't look like us, it doesn't move like us, we don't like it, get it off of us. And she just explained that, they'll soon see that it's stronger, faster, even better with this organism as part of it. It will be hard at the beginning for them to adjust to this new thing, but then it'll be amazing.
Quite manipulative and also not a very believable account. It really came across like a story that she tells herself, similar to her elaborate, obviously false accounts and recounting of how she used to get ready with Harry before an event, and he didn't back this up or verify this at all. This feels very much the same. And once again, it's another one of those claims that have been disputed by nobody has confirmed her version of events here, quite the opposite. A lot of moments just like this throughout the series really come across to the viewer like what Meghan's inner dialogue is, trying to rationalize the things that she has done and the things that she has happened and try to find ways to explain it away. And instead of just owning it, much like she did with The Bench, where she blamed publishing The Bench on friends who said, no, this should be published, rather than just saying she wanted to publish it. I feel like this is that same tactic that she's doing here. That's how it comes across to me. Well, I'm curious to know if it comes across the same way to you. But it definitely represents the way Meghan viewed herself as really different and sort of excluding herself from the royal family and just the environment. She was very resistant to just go with the flow and give things a try and take the guidance and see how things would go should she just follow advice and do things the way they wanted her to. Now, I've said this before, I'll say it again. When you're new to something and you notice how something could be improved or done better, like say new to a job the way Meghan was, a lot of people forget that senior working royals was an actual job with a job title to be diplomatic and represent the Queen or the monarch who now is King Charles, but at the time Queen Elizabeth. Noticing things could be different or having ideas about how to do things differently or wanting to do things kind of a different way because you're putting your name and your face to it is all fine. What's not fine is trying to push that onto the job or let that affect how you move about your job before you've had a chance to actually learn the job. Meghan Markle tried to change things immediately and do things differently immediately instead of really learning things and giving it a try the way it is first. And there's a lot of value in just giving things a try the way they are before suggesting changes for so many reasons. We don't even need to outline it here because it's so obvious, which really makes you wonder, why then didn't Meghan give it a fair go and try things the way the job description, so to speak, outlined? Why didn't she follow the rules or guidelines she was offered? Many people think it's because she was just ready to hightail it the second she got in the door, but this comment that she made here in this clip really sends the message or makes you think or wonder if it was more so that she just wanted it to not work out and wanted to not fit in and purposefully didn't want to try to cooperate at all, whether that's some sort of oppositional defiant issue or just a personality clash, being really stubborn and difficult in general, or something more sinister or deeper or manipulative. Leave your thoughts in the comments on that. And next we have more details from their wedding day. Meghan recaps yet another version of events leading up to the wedding. I have an entire playlist discussing a lot of the wedding drama and a lot of the things that went on around that time, so I won't re-go over it here. I'll just link that playlist for you up here. If you haven't seen the videos that we did discussing the wedding and the drama with her dad, it's very interesting when we go into great detail in those videos, so I'll just link those for you. But here, Harry says that a big wedding was expected because he's Diana's son, which is completely false. A big wedding was not expected. In fact, there was rumors and leaks coming out to the press, not necessarily leaks, but rather the press was asking about what sort of a wedding, when it would be, things like that once the engagement was announced. And palace staff had initially been sharing that it would be a smaller affair, a more private affair, similar to that of Princess Eugenie. Now, Princess Eugenie's wedding was still ginormous. It was still a very big deal, but it was considered a more private affair, not the same as, say, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. That was this huge big deal because, future king and queen here. Because Meghan was previously married and divorced, and because Harry and Meghan were not obviously, going to be king and queen one day, they were in a supporting role, so to speak. Compared to most people's wedding, it would still be ginormous and huge and a big deal and over the top and magnificent, just like Princess Eugenie's was. However, wouldn't be up to the same level of Catherine and William. But when Harry and Meghan caught wind that they were going to be having a smaller wedding and they felt that wasn't fair, they changed it and made it into the big spectacle that now they complain about. Their version of events that they were told or even forced to have this big wedding is completely false. Sources from the palace and the wedding planning groups of people say that is the exact opposite. Harry and Meghan were the ones pushing for a big wedding, and Meghan even specifically wanted to make sure that her wedding would be just as expensive, if not more expensive, than Catherine and William, which is just a weird thing to do and a weird angle to take on things. And a lot of people will say, well, it's his word versus her word, or these wedding planning crew or team's word against Meghan's word. Who do you believe? Well, Meghan and Harry have gone on TV and written books and done interviews multiple times where they blatantly lied, and other people have had to come out with receipts to be like, no, that's not true. Archbishop of Canterbury, for example, and many, many others. And so the public aren't really inclined to believe Harry and Meghan's version of events, which is another way that they shot themselves in the foot. By making these grandiose statements or lies or exaggerations that are so easily proven false, they've become extremely unreliable, to where even if another source is maybe not being completely honest either, we're much more inclined to believe that other source who we don't know has a track record of lying, while we do know that Meghan and Harry have a track record of lying. There's a brief moment where the designer of the wedding dress spoke for literally just a moment and says that she claimed that she knew the dress needed to be flawless, but it wasn't.
Harry's dad is very charming. And I said to him, I've lost my dad in this. So him as my father-in-law was really important to me. So I asked him to walk me down the aisle, and he said yes.
Many viewers took issue with the fact that Meghan continuously calls Harry's father, King Charles, just Harry's dad, rather than King Charles, or at the time, Prince Charles, similar to what she did when she spoke about Queen Elizabeth. Rather than calling her Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth or anything like that, she just says Harry's grandmother. A lot of people took issue with that, found it to be a little bit disrespectful, especially given Meghan Markle's really far removed position from the family. It would make sense for, say, Prince William or even Catherine, Princess of Wales now, who's very, very close with the family and has been part of the family for a long time, to call, say, King Charles her father-in-law, whereas Meghan, who, was only with the royal family for a hot second, maybe should take a more formal tone to seem less disrespectful. It would have been wise for her given the temperature of things. But her quotes here not only are misleading, saying she lost her father, which is manipulative, and many would say is just a complete lie to phrase it that way. But it's also yet a different version of events. We've had like 3 or 4 different versions about how it came to be that King Charles would walk Meghan down the aisle. Initially, the reports were that King Charles offered. Once he found out that Thomas would not be able to attend the wedding, King Charles reached out and offered. Another version of events is that Meghan said she would just walk down the aisle alone, and the Queen, as well as the wedding planners, thought that would not necessarily be a great idea and suggested King Charles walk her down the aisle. Third version of events came from Prince Harry himself, where he says that he reached out to his father to suggest or to ask if he would walk Meghan down the aisle or would offer to walk Meghan down the aisle, because Harry found out that Thomas wouldn't be coming and thought he would try to help solve this problem or just do something nice for Meghan. But Meghan was upset because she actually did want to walk herself down the aisle. So she wasn't too pleased that Harry took it upon himself to try to do something nice in this situation. Poor Harry, I guess you could view it that way. But the fourth version, which was this one here, Meghan claims it was her idea and she reached out and asked King Charles. Which is which? So many lies. Next, they discuss their time living at Nottingham Cottage. And I think here they thought that they would come off more normal or like down to earth, or they thought they'd come off unpretentious by discussing the, modest cottage. However, it came off incredibly snobby and ungrateful and pretentious and very out of touch.
A lot of people concerned we were living in a palace, and we were, in a cottage.
We were living on palace grounds. Yeah. Kensington Palace sounds very regal. Of course it does. It says palace in the name. But Nottingham Cottage, it was so small.
The whole thing's on a slight lean, really low ceiling, so I don't know who was there before. They must have been very short.
It was just a chapter in our lives where I don't think anyone could believe what it was actually like behind the scenes.
Well, Oprah came over for tea, didn't she?
She did.
And when she came in, she sat down, she goes, "No one would ever believe it."
No one would ever believe it.
It even included this gross dance. So if you aren't familiar, they were living in Nottingham Cottage before the wedding and had been offered an apartment in Kensington Palace near where Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, were living. It just needed to be fixed up for them, but they declined. They didn't want to live that close to the Waleses, I guess, is what the story was at the time. And then Harry and Meghan got it in their heads that they wanted to live in an actual palace and live in Windsor Castle with the Queen, and she said no, you could have Frogmore Cottage instead. There was even a rumor at one point that they wanted Frogmore House, which is much larger than Frogmore Cottage. All of it seems believable that Meghan and Harry would be incredibly dissatisfied with the cottage, that they would not want to be close by where William and Catherine were due to all the jealousy and ego struggles that were happening at the time, coming from the Sussexes, not the Waleses. And it's also completely believable that Meghan would think that they would be allowed to live in Windsor Castle. But they weren't, and they apparently took a lot of offense to this. Left completely out of this is that entire conversation that they were offered other places to stay, that Catherine and William lived in a small cottage, even lived in Nottingham Cottage for a short period of time. But they lived in a really small, modest place for quite some time before they had their kids as well, and when Prince George was a baby. They didn't start moving into bigger houses until Princess Charlotte came along. Next, Meghan recaps the one and only engagement that she went out on with the Queen. And she talks quite fondly about this experience, but it's really quite hypocritical when you consider the fact that they were not only very difficult during their time with the royal family, but they did Oprah and Spare and all these other things that were very unkind to the Queen and quite distressing for her. People, especially narcissists or those high in narcissism, tend to forget that when you're not getting along with siblings and you're being difficult and making trouble the way Harry and Meghan were, they're not going with the flow at all, it makes things hard on everyone else. It was making things hard on the Queen. All the trouble that they caused with the Waleses that they constantly blame on Prince William and actively blame on Prince William throughout the Netflix series, all of that stuff was stressing out the Queen, no doubt about it. And these types of people, like Harry and Meghan, they spend a lot of time finger pointing, but completely ignore the fact that they were a source of stress. So it's a little odd to hear her talk so fondly of the Queen when she didn't care enough to just stay calm or just not complain publicly about the Queen's institution. Meghan then takes entire credit for the Together cookbook for the Grenfell Tower fire, which was actually mostly put together by the Hub Community Kitchen charity and group rather than Meghan herself. And in this portion of the episode, she spends a great deal of time discussing how she decided to do this and that she was the one to, come up with the idea, which I don't really believe, but also she probably should have spent more time on the actual organization itself, on the hub, on those women, rather than the huge amount of time discussing how it was all her idea. Next comes the Australia tour, where she wore this see-through skirt. And Harry and Meghan are just incredibly enamored with their own performance and themselves over the Australia tour. They talk a lot about how amazed they were with the job that they did while in Australia, which is kind of funny considering all the trouble that they caused and the silly non-existent baby bump holding that she was doing on the trip, things like that. He claims that they had to announce the pregnancy before or at the beginning of the Australia tour because she was showing. But she wasn't showing to that extent, that nothing that couldn't have just been camouflaged with slightly looser clothing. Anyway, they were so incredibly impressed with themselves that they assumed that the royal family was just jealous, that all the problems started from the Australia tour and stemmed from this intense jealousy of Harry and Meghan, which clearly couldn't be further from the truth, at all. This just completely outlandish. And really, it kind of made me feel sad for the Sussexes when watching this, that they thought that all these problems were from jealousy or from them doing a good job when they didn't do that good of a job at all. And so this distance from reality that Harry and Meghan have, it did kind of make me feel bad for them in a way, that they thought that was the source of the problems when it really wasn't at all. But at the same time, didn't really feel bad for them at the end of the day because they're adults and they should know better.
They'd set up breakfast for Harry and I.
And on the front page of the Telegraph, Meghan.
I went, oh my God.
She was like, but it's not my fault. And I said, I know. And my mum felt the same way.
But no one cared. Literally no one cared who was in the middle of the front page. So that, again, doesn't really make sense. Also, they're ignoring the fact that King Charles, then Prince Charles, and Prince William, all of these people had been through these sorts of things before and had been part of the monarchy doing working royal stuff for many, many years when Meghan came along, and were fully aware that someone new was going to have more coverage or might have prioritized coverage. The Queen especially would be very aware of this after everything she had seen, all the women marrying in, Princess Diana and the divorce. She knew the way the press works, and the fact that somebody new or something new going on was going to play a bigger role in the headlines for a while. Nobody really cared. It doesn't make sense that Harry and Meghan act like this would have been some sort of unexpected assault to the senses for the royals. It makes no sense. It just is illogical, much like Harry and Meghan in general. But they really, really push hard the angle that there was jealousy throughout this episode. And obviously it is a clear diversion for her bad behaviors, but also it neglects the fact that as people began to work with Meghan and get to know her more, they simply didn't like her because of how she treated people, how she acted, the intense overacting every time she was talking to someone or the press, the way she was making demands as a newbie. That doesn't sit well in any job or industry. Even just Harry and Meghan walking about with the assumption that everyone is jealous will come through in the way you show up in your interactions as a chip on your shoulder. That sort of smug, oh, they're just jealous vibe shows through. So as they were thinking that that's what's going on and that they were so much better than everybody else, I guess, this sort of snobbish vibe that they're literally copping to in this interview, the way they're talking about things, they're admitting that they were acting like they were better than everybody else and whatnot. they never put two and two together, that that sort of a vibe was coming through to people and creating more and more negative feedback for themselves because people don't like when you act that way. People simply don't appreciate that sort of a vibe, that sort of an energy and mentality that Harry and Meghan had, and so it would have just perpetuated the problems. Additionally, we know by their own admission that they were already talking about leaving and wanting to leave at that point. And so if that's your long game and that's kind of where your long-term vision is, it's impossible to be giving it your all here and now, because part of you is aimed at what's next, that in 6 months time you're leaving and moving somewhere else and going to be at an entirely different job, so you really don't care that much about this job, you're not invested in it. And that's exactly what was happening with Harry and Meghan. So that also kind of explained why they were unwilling to be cooperative, because they simply felt they didn't need to be that invested in it.
And then we had a walkabout in Liverpool, and there was a group of women, and one of them said to me, "What you're doing to your father's not right." It was the first time that I went, oh my God, people actually believe this stuff. And then my entire center was rocked to its core.
Lies, that's one thing. You kind of get used to that when you live within this family. But what they were doing to her and the effect that it was having on her, like enough of the pain, enough of the suffering.
So this clip speaks to a root problem with Harry and Meghan, that they cannot handle any sort of feedback at all. This comment, this person's opinion, was so distressing to Meghan Markle. Instead of realizing that people are going to have opinions about what you do because you're a public figure now, it just is what it is. And that's why Princess Catherine and Prince William and King Charles and Queen Camilla, all of them, Sophie and Edward, Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, they're so private. Like, their private lives and things going on within their family never comes out in the news. That's a big reason for it, because people are going to form opinions, and you just don't need that. You don't want that. Nobody needs that. So while Harry and Meghan should have handled things differently and prevented these sorts of things from coming out in the press, they also shouldn't be so brittle and thin-skinned, because this just proves that they weren't cut out for this type of public figure position. Next, they recap her allegations of a mental health crisis, and Doria admits that Meghan did in fact tell her that she was feeling that low mental health-wise. So this completely contradicts previous accounts and the accounts in Oprah that they had absolutely no one to reach out to and no one to talk to and told no one. Yet another contradiction of their own words, or lie, whichever phrase you prefer. The proclivity to categorize absolutely all press and feedback that's not exclusively positive is hugely problematic on its own, but it also led them down the path of reactivity. And it created this dynamic where they were automatically always sucked into these petty squabbles in the media and about what the media was saying and who was saying it to the media and what are the sources and da-da-da-da. They got so caught up in it and so focused on it. And part of it was because anything that wasn't positive they viewed as offensive. What I realized during this part of the episode, when they were discussing Meghan's mental health problems and her stress over press coverage, and both of them, their dissatisfaction with press coverage, why didn't they just say that since Meghan was like in her pregnancy and going to be having a baby and whatnot very soon, why didn't they just say, well, Meghan's going to take a step back from working royal duties for a while. She's just going to be a stay-at-home mom for a while. It's just Harry's going to be a working royal for a while. Why didn't they just do that? It would have made sense. It would have been perfect timing, because it would have been like, well, you know, she's having a baby. She's going to focus on starting her family, and she's going to focus on this time with their newborn. And they had like just moved into Frogmore Cottage, or they were getting ready to move into Frogmore. So why didn't they just use that as a moment and an excuse, and a very understandable, justifiable excuse to be like, well, she's not only going to go on maternity leave, but she's going to stay out for a little bit longer, or like an extended maternity leave. I don't think anybody would have viewed that as weird at all. And Harry could have continued doing royal duties during that time. Meghan could have still shown up for some things like Sandringham and whatnot, Christmas, things like that. But they didn't do that. And she probably didn't want to do that because it would mean no spotlight and far less attention. And that in and of itself, that obvious solution sitting right there and would have been very convenient and minimized any sort of discussion in the media as to what's going on and why. It would have been a perfect cover, so to speak, if you actually were dealing with a mental health crisis like she alludes to or claims to. Because they didn't take advantage of that or do that or use that as a solution and decided to step back into the fray and engage with public-facing stuff again, it kind of backfires when you really think about it. It actually lends itself to the theory that all of this is kind of a made-up or exaggerated story, that she wasn't actually struggling with her mental health that bad, because if she was, then why the heck didn't they do things differently or make different choices? It really doesn't add up. Following this conversation, Harry complains more about the press and his family's advice to not fight the press, but his family is right. The royals are right. You can't fight the media because, at least in the US, free press is fundamental. It's just not something you can complain about or get bent out of shape over. It's just not. But it's also going to feed the negatives. It's only going to create more stories to do so, just like we've seen with Harry and Meghan over the years. Harry recounts when their offices separated, but he conveniently, once again, ignores the fact that they were creating a negative working environment for Kensington Palace staff, and that is why they could no longer stay as a joint office. It was because of their bad behaviors. And reflecting on their dissatisfaction and frustration with press coverage and how they chose to deal with it by fighting it, we could ask ourselves, well, how did that go? We've seen it play out for a few years now, and it's gone terribly. It didn't fix anything. It didn't change anything for Harry and Meghan. In fact, it made it worse. It's resulted in a continued worsening of their public image. It only made things worse. So once again, we have more evidence that Harry's family was right and giving him really solid advice, and he ignored it. Let's take a look at this next clip about the controversial baby shower.
It was so wrong. These independent, strong, successful women choose to use their own money, and it's not taxpayer money, to throw a party for their friend from a place of love. Why are you taking such a beautiful moment and trying to ruin it?
So Meghan entirely missed the point here. Security was still taxpayer funded for this trip, regardless of the trip itself maybe not being. It was a hypocritical choice. All their environmental preaching and talking about carbon footprints and how the general public should take less vacations was something Harry had told people leading up to this baby shower thing. And then Meghan takes a private jet back and forth across the Atlantic. Publicizing the baby shower at all was a huge mistake, and doing it in America made it harder to keep it quiet. It stuck out. It was a very obvious thing to do. If she was, as she claims, having a hard time and her friends knew she was having a hard time, then they should have made it a stealth shower. They should have come over to see her. They should have done it in the UK so they could keep it under wraps. At a private palace residence, nobody would have known that there was a baby shower at all. Nobody would have known it would have even happened. And to use Harry and Meghan's own phrase and words, that it could have been special and just for us, like they always say. Doing a shower and not having it out in the media would have been another private thing that they could keep just for themselves. But Meghan clearly doesn't want that, because every chance she gets, she does publicize things and let it be known what's gone on. They talk more about moving into Frogmore Cottage and the renovations and expenses of it, as well as the birth of Archie. But they left out all of the drama surrounding it. They left out a lot of the details. If you guys are interested, I could do a video kind of recapping the weirdness that happened around the birth of Archie and the announcements, but only if you want to. So you have to click the like button and leave a comment below if you want a video on it, and maybe I'll do it sometime after the holidays. But they show a lot of positive coverage during this segment. And once again, every time in these episodes, they show the positive coverage and reactions from the public. People were still excited leading up to the birth of Archie and everything. People were still excited for the Sussexes. But then they conveniently ignore all the positive vibes every time they want to complain about something. And despite all the drama and controversy, people were still excited for Harry and Meghan to have their baby. And as per usual, you'll be noticing the pattern by now. We have another version of events. Back in the Oprah videos, I'll try to link the specific one that has the clip, but she said that they were never asked to take a picture. But in this Netflix series, she claims this time that there was pressure for a picture and that they spent a lot of time trying to figure out how they could do a picture after giving birth to Archie. But this is completely contradicting their own stories in Oprah.
With my doctor. And that's who I trusted with my pregnancy. And they said, right, but she's at Portland Hospital and the steps are at this hospital. And I said, okay, well, we could do a photo call in front of Portland Hospital. And they said, it's impossible. We couldn't barricade these streets off and it would create a threat for the emergency room entrance, because that's where you would have to do this picture. And we said, okay, well then what's the hybrid? Can we give them more time at the castle? And everything internally was like, yes, great, oh yes. At no point did someone go, absolutely not.
And thank you everybody for all the well wishes and the kindness. It just means so much.
So the press was reacting because Harry and Meghan had literally said that they would not do a picture with Archie because Archie wouldn't be given a title of prince prematurely before Queen Elizabeth's passing. It's quite frustrating to watch this constant lying by omission and like leaving the facts off the table and leaving the full story out of the discussion. And it feels manipulative, especially from people who talk a lot about misinformation and disinformation, to give only part of the story knowingly at the same time. But this episode concludes or wraps up with them discussing the South Africa tour, which they went on with Archie. Behind the scenes, you'll remember, I'll link the playlist where we covered the South Africa tour at the top of the screen if I can, but you'll recall, behind the scenes during the South Africa tour, they were initiating Megxit, initiating their press lawsuits, and throwing hissy fits the whole time, and getting really combative with the press in like an unprofessional way. Harry was straight up rude. They do acknowledge Meghan Markle's unwillingness to prioritize diplomacy in her role as a senior working royal, which is just kind of left there. It's not addressed. Meghan never addresses that was kind of one of her mistakes, was that she didn't grasp that she was in a role that required a great deal of diplomacy and discretion and being more careful and conscious of certain things. She's not just a celebrity when you're with the royal family. You're part of something bigger and very, very different. And she never was willing to do that. And they mention it, but then they never discuss it, and she never that would have been a good opportunity for her to say, like, yeah, this was a mistake that I made and I didn't really kind of understand the gravity of that part of the role. She could have done that and it would have softened her image some. But no, Meg cannot admit mistakes. She also complained in Archetypes about the accommodations, having a fire in Archie's room, which is so over the top, and I will link that video for you too. I'm sending you on a wild goose chase with all these videos, I'm sorry. But I don't want to repeat, if you've already seen the video, I don't want to repeat it over and over to you. But then also on this tour, we had the Tom Bradby moment, the infamous, I'm not okay, horrible choice, horrible PR moment. There was a documentary with Tom Bradby happening at the time that was supposed to be a behind the scenes of the royal tour and was put together, probably, PR project to help Harry and Meghan move past the drama and the sort of rough start they had to working royal life, that it hadn't been going well. There was a lot of rumors of difficult behavior, and they probably arranged for this documentary to happen to try to help things, but Meghan stepped in it, of course. She took this documentary as an opportunity to make it all about her, by making it about her struggles, rather than using it as a PR exercise to try to communicate better values and make friends, so to speak, with the public. She didn't think of it that way, and that's really how you've got to think of it. You have to think of it as something you need to nurture your relationship with the public when you are a public figure and in a public role the way they were. But their account of the public reaction to her "I'm not okay" South Africa moment was positive, which is not factual. How it actually went down was that the response was hugely negative. We have these privileged, out of touch, selfish, and self-indulgent people complaining while being feet away from an organization that supports women who have been, traumatized. And Meghan's complaining that the being a royal is hard. Are you joking? And it was also really unprofessional, just in general. It was an unprofessional choice. It was a negative response from the public. It was very negative feedback, and it did create more problems for Harry and Meghan. Also, Prince Harry completely ignores and sidesteps the fact that Prince William made very strong attempts to try to get in touch with his brother after this documentary and clip came to light and hit the press, that Prince William was trying to set up an emergency meeting with his brother right away to try to talk to him. And Meghan planted it in Harry's head that that couldn't happen because palace staff would find out and know about it. Why that would matter, nobody knows. It's a mystery still to this day. Well, folks, we are halfway through the Netflix series. Next episode, we will conclude the last 2 episodes' summaries, and then we will discuss and analyze the series as a whole and what Harry and Meghan really were trying to communicate here. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Be sure you're subscribed so you do not miss the upcoming videos, and I will see you next time. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye.